First story. Once upon a time, there was a pregnant woman named Sarah who was in her third trimester. One day, Sarah decided to go shopping for some new clothes to accommodate her growing belly. She went to a clothing store and started browsing the maternity section. As she was looking through the racks, she felt a sudden urge to sneeze. She tried to hold it in, but it was too strong. She let out a loud achoo, and felt a warm sensation in her pants. To her horror, she realized that she had accidentally peed herself. Feeling embarrassed and helpless, Sarah quickly waddled over to the nearest sales assistant and explained what had happened. The sales assistant was very understanding and helped her find a new pair of pants to wear. As Sarah was trying on the new pants, she suddenly sneezed again, and this time, she let out a loud fart. She blushed with embarrassment and apologized to the sales assistant, who laughed it off and reassured her that it happens to the best of us. Feeling relieved and grateful for the sales assistant's kindness, Sarah purchased the new pants and left the store with a smile on her face. From that day on, she made sure to keep a pack of tissues and an extra change of clothes with her at all times, just in case. Despite the embarrassing incident, Sarah looks back on it with fondness and laughs about how funny and unpredictable pregnancy can be. That is it. Next story. Jenny was a pregnant woman in her 7th month. One day, she was at a restaurant with her husband when she suddenly felt a craving for pickles and ice cream. She quickly ordered the unusual combination and eagerly waited for it to arrive. When the waiter brought her order to the table, she took a big bite of the pickles and immediately made a face. To her surprise, the pickles were extremely spicy. She quickly grabbed a glass of water and took a big sip, but it only made the spiciness worse. In the midst of her discomfort, Jenny's water suddenly broke. She gasped and looked around in panic, not knowing what to do next. Her husband quickly sprang into action and flagged down the nearest waiter, explaining that they needed to leave immediately. The waiter, not wanting to cause a scene, quickly brought the check to their table. But when Jenny's husband saw the total amount, he nearly fell off his chair. The bill was 3 times more than what they expected. Confused and frustrated, they asked the waiter what was going on. The waiter simply replied, "Well, you did order the spicy pickle and ice cream special. It's the most expensive item on the menu." Jenny and her husband couldn't help but laugh at the ridiculous situation. They paid the bill, left a generous tip for the waiter, and headed straight to the hospital to welcome their new bundle of joy. From that day on, they made sure to read the menu carefully before ordering, and always had a good laugh about the spicy pickle and ice cream mishap. That is it. Next story. Laura was a pregnant woman who had been craving pizza all week. She had been dreaming about it for days and couldn't wait to get her hands on a cheesy slice. So, one evening, she convinced her husband to order a large pizza with all her favorite toppings. As they eagerly waited for the delivery, Laura started feeling contractions. She was so excited about the pizza that she didn't want to go to the hospital until she had a chance to enjoy it. So, they decided to wait until after dinner. When the pizza finally arrived, Laura dove right in. She was savoring every bite, but the contractions were getting stronger and closer together. Her husband started to worry and urged her to go to the hospital, but Laura refused. As she finished the last slice, Laura suddenly felt a sharp pain and her water broke. She knew it was time to go to the hospital. They quickly got in the car and drove to the hospital, with Laura clutching onto the empty pizza box for comfort. When they arrived at the hospital, Laura was rushed into the delivery room. Her husband looked around for a place to put the pizza box and ended up placing it on a nearby table. The nurses and doctors looked at him in confusion, wondering why there was a pizza box in the delivery room. Laura's husband explained that his wife had been craving pizza all week and had insisted on finishing it before coming to the hospital. The medical staff couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. After a few hours of labor, Laura gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The delivery room was filled with joy and laughter, and the pizza box became a symbol of the unforgettable moment. From that day on, Laura and her family always associated pizza with the happy memory of their son's birth. And whenever they ordered pizza, they would always chuckle and remember the hilarious pizza delivery story. That is it. Next story. Samantha was a pregnant woman who was in her 8th month. She had been experiencing strange cravings throughout her pregnancy, but one day she woke up with an unusual craving for bacon. Without hesitation, Samantha asked her husband to make her a bacon sandwich for breakfast. He obliged and started cooking up some bacon. As he was frying the bacon, he suddenly noticed that it looked a bit strange. He called out to Samantha and asked her if she had noticed anything odd about the bacon. She replied, "No, it looks fine to me." So, he continued cooking it and made her the sandwich. As Samantha was enjoying her bacon sandwich, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her belly. She clutched her stomach and winced in pain. Her husband was alarmed and asked her if she needed to go to the hospital, but Samantha shook her head and said she was okay. After a few moments, the pain subsided, and Samantha started to feel better. But her husband couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He decided to investigate the bacon and realized that it was expired. He rushed over to Samantha and told her what he had discovered. Samantha was shocked and immediately threw up the bacon sandwich. Her husband apologized profusely and promised to never make her eat expired bacon again. From that day on, they made sure to check the expiration dates on all their food before eating it. And whenever they saw bacon, they would always chuckle and remember the hilarious bacon incident. That is it. Next story. Jessica was a pregnant woman who was in her 9th month. She was getting tired of being pregnant and was eagerly waiting for her due date to arrive. One day, she woke up feeling different and suspected that her water had broken. She called out to her husband, who was fast asleep, and said, "Honey, wake up. I think my water just broke." Her husband groggily woke up and asked her what they should do. Jessica replied, "We have to go to the hospital." As they were getting ready to leave, Jessica suddenly felt a strong urge to eat something sweet. She asked her husband to stop at a nearby bakery so she could buy a cupcake. Her husband was confused but didn't want to argue with a woman in labor, so he drove to the bakery. Jessica quickly waddled inside the bakery and picked out a delicious-looking cupcake. She took a big bite and savored the sweet flavor. But just as she was about to take another bite, she suddenly felt a sharp pain. She clutched her stomach and groaned in pain. Her husband was panicking and asked her what was wrong. Jessica replied, "I think I'm having a contraction." Her husband urged her to hurry up and finish the cupcake so they could go to the hospital. Jessica quickly gobbled up the rest of the cupcake and they rushed to the hospital. When they arrived, the nurses were confused as to why Jessica was carrying an empty cupcake wrapper. But Jessica didn't care, she was just happy to finally give birth to her baby. From that day on, Jessica and her family always associated cupcakes with the happy memory of their child's birth. And whenever they saw a cupcake, they would always chuckle and remember the hilarious cupcake incident. That is it. Next story. Alexa was a pregnant woman who had been experiencing morning sickness throughout her pregnancy. One day, she woke up feeling extra nauseous and knew that she needed to eat something to settle her stomach. She stumbled to the kitchen and started rummaging through the pantry, looking for something to eat. She spotted a bag of chips and immediately grabbed it. As she was munching on the chips, she suddenly felt an intense craving for ice cream. Without hesitation, Alexa asked her husband to go out and buy her some ice cream. Her husband was hesitant at first, but seeing how uncomfortable Alexa was, he agreed to go to the store. As he was driving to the store, he suddenly remembered that they were out of gas. He knew he wouldn't make it to the store and back without running out of gas, so he decided to stop at the gas station first. As he was filling up the tank, he suddenly heard a loud noise coming from the car. He looked under the hood and realized that the car had broken down. He was stuck at the gas station with no way to get the ice cream. He called Alexa to tell her the bad news and she started to cry. Her husband felt terrible and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, he had an idea. He asked the gas station attendant if he had any ice cream in the freezer. To his surprise, the attendant did have ice cream, so he bought a pint of it and drove back home. He presented the ice cream to Alexa and she was overjoyed. She hugged her husband and said, "This is the best ice cream I've ever had." From that day on, they always joked about the time they had to get ice cream from a gas station. And whenever they saw a bag of chips or a pint of ice cream, they would always chuckle and remember the hilarious ice cream incident. That is it. Next story. Nina was a pregnant woman who was in her 7th month. She had been feeling restless and couldn't sleep well at night. One day, she came across a pregnancy pillow that promised to provide comfort and support for pregnant women. Excited about the prospect of finally getting a good night's sleep, she ordered the pillow online. When the pillow arrived, she couldn't wait to try it out. She crawled into bed with the pillow and fell asleep instantly. But as the night went on, Nina started to feel strange. She felt like she was sinking into the pillow and couldn't move. She called out to her husband, who was fast asleep, but he didn't hear her. Panicked, Nina tried to wriggle out of the pillow but couldn't move. She started to panic and wondered if she would be stuck in the pillow forever. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her stomach. She clutched her belly and realized that she was having a contraction. She called out to her husband again, this time more urgently. Her husband woke up and saw her struggling in the pillow. He quickly realized what was happening and tried to help her out of the pillow. But he accidentally ripped the pillow, causing it to deflate and sending Nina tumbling onto the bed. Feeling embarrassed but relieved to be free from the pillow, Nina and her husband laughed about the incident. From that day on, they always joked about the killer pillow, and whenever they saw a pregnancy pillow, they would always chuckle and remember the hilarious pillow incident. That is it. Next story. Sophie was a pregnant woman who was in her 8th month. She had been experiencing strange cravings throughout her pregnancy, but one day, she suddenly had a craving for something she had never tried before, pickles and ice cream. Excited about the prospect of trying something new, she asked her husband to go to the store and buy pickles and ice cream. Her husband was hesitant at first, but seeing how excited Sophie was, he agreed to go to the store. As he was walking down the aisle looking for pickles and ice cream, he suddenly heard a commotion coming from the other end of the aisle. He walked over to investigate and saw a group of people huddled around a man who was performing magic tricks. Intrigued, he watched as the man pulled a rabbit out of a hat and made a bouquet of flowers appear out of thin air. The man then asked for a volunteer from the audience and pointed to Sophie's husband. Feeling nervous but excited, he walked up to the man and volunteered. The man asked him to pick a card from a deck and memorize it. He then shuffled the deck and asked him to put the card back in the deck. The man then proceeded to shuffle the deck some more and asked him to pick a card again. To his amazement, he picked the exact same card he had memorized earlier. Feeling impressed, he walked back to Sophie with a newfound sense of confidence. He proudly presented her with the pickles and ice cream, feeling like a true magician. From that day on, whenever they saw a magician performing magic tricks, they would always chuckle and remember the hilarious pickle and ice cream incident. That's it. Have a nice day, see you later on this channel.